Hello, everybody. Welcome. Come on in. My name is Reed Arnold. I'm joining you here today with GMAT Club. I am an instructor at Manhattan Prep. I teach the GMAT and have done so for almost a decade at this point. I might as well start rounding up. I'd love to meet you all. If you type in the chat, just let me know your name, where you are, and how the GMAT's going for you. It's good to be here, GMAT Club. Thanks for having me. Really excited. We're talking about the scoring algorithm, how this test is graded. But before we jump in, let's get to know each other a little bit. Sarmad from Pakistan, welcome, Sarmad. Bhavya, welcome. Losad. Now let's see. We have someone from Pakistan. Where else are we coming from? It's always fun to host these things. We do our own free GMAT prep hours, and we have students from usually countries all over the world. It's a really fun thing. Morocco, welcome from Morocco. Oh, wonderful, Afnan. I'm glad the parallelism video helped you. I am proud of that one. I think it's a good streamlined lesson on how parallelism works. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Mukesh taking the test on Christmas Eve. Well, then Christmas will be a nice celebration. Fedor from Germany, wonderful. Sebastian from Argentina. There we go. We have India, Pakistan, Germany, Argentina. Igor from France, aiming for a 700. You're close, Igor. You got a 680. You're right there. Looks to me, Igor, just based on your score, your Quant's very strong. See if you can bolster that verbal a little bit, and you're right there on it. Bobby from India, welcome. Naveen, Sorudeep. Michael Zambetti from Georgia in the United States. Welcome, Michael. I myself am broadcaster too, where I'm from. I'm broadcasting from New York, in the U.S. Harshita taking the test the day after tomorrow. How you feeling, Harshita? Are you excited? And Amol taking the test tomorrow. Woo. How are we feeling about it? Nervous, excited? You ready to take it? First time on Wednesday, Fedor. Welcome. That's great. Yeah, great. Let's wish each other luck. Always nice. A little nervous. That's okay. It's understandable. Remember that nerves and excitement are mirrors of the same coin. Different sides of the same coin. Turn that nerves into excitement to perform. When we're talking today about how this test works, how the algorithm works, and I hope that in doing so it will kind of help your mindset during the test. I love the way the GMAT is graded. We're going to emphasize today how it's very different from other tests, and I think it's actually a really neat way to grade a test, and in a way it can kind of take some pressure off. Hey Raj, welcome. Pooja, welcome. Do you pay each time you retake the test? Yeah, you do. You have to pay for retakes. Yeah, each time you take the test, you pay to take it. All right, gang. Please feel free to keep asking questions in the chat and saying hello and talking to each other and wishing each other luck. I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. We're talking again about the GMAT algorithm, how it's graded, because again, this is a unique style of testing. I had never encountered anything quite like it when I first took it, and it's important to know how this test works so that you have, those of you that are taking the test here in a few days, I want you to have the right mindset, know what you're getting into, and know how you should move through the test with the understanding of how it's graded top of mind. Okay. So let's jump in. First off, there are 4 sections of the GMAT. Those of you who have been studying might be familiar with this, but let's just lay this out. There's the argument essay. It's a 30-minute essay. You're graded. You get a score from 0 to 6 on that essay. The integrated reasoning is a section that kind of combines quant and verbal skills. That is scored from 1 to 8. And then there's the quant and the verbal section. These are going to be the sections that we spend most of our time on this morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where in the world you are, because we're coming from all over. But quant and verbal are going to be the main focus today, because those are the sections that combine to get your 200 to 800 point score that schools look at most. In quant, you can get a score from 6 to 51. In verbal, you can also get a score from 6 to 51, except that's kind of a lie. It's not a lie, but scores above a 45 in verbal get very rare. A 45 is already the top 1%. And so scores like 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, those, go from 1% to 0.5% to 0.1% to 0.01%, one in, I don't know the exact data, but 1 in 10,000 test takers gets a 51 in verbal. It's just very rare. So for all intents and purposes, I say that a 45 is the maximum verbal score. Okay. So those are the quant and verbal scores that you get for each section. Those are the scores that then combine to get that 200 to 800 point score. So notice your essay score doesn't affect the 200 to 800 point score. The integrated reasoning score does not affect your 200 to 800 point score. Okay. That 200 to 800 point score comes strictly from the quant and the verbal section. And the way it happens is basically additive. I'm sure the algorithm is actually significantly more complicated than that. But it seems to basically map into something like this. So if you look at this table here, if you get a quant 47, say, and a verbal 41, those add up to an 88. And quant and verbal scores that add up to 88 tend to result in 720s. Could be 730, could be a 710, but tend to result in 720s. So you can see that diagonal there of the blue 720s. Those are scores that add up to about an 88. The purple scores there, those are scores that add up to a 79, and then add up to a 79 tends to map to a 650. Could be a little bit less, 640, could be a little bit more, 660. But scores that add up to 79 tend to map to 650. Notice we have taken out all the verbal scores above a 46 because, again, while they are theoretically possible, they are very, very rare. Okay. So those are the numbers of the scores. That's the numbers that these sections generate. The thing that is more interesting about the test is the way those numbers are generated, how the test itself is actually graded. So here's the old way of grading a test. Let's imagine you had a 30-question test, and it's being taken by Samantha and Karthik, and I let you know here which ones they got right and which ones they got wrong as they went through this 30-question test. And at the end of the day, Samantha got 20 out of 30 right, and Karthik got 19 out of 30 right. So if this is a standard test, who gets the higher score on this test? Samantha or Karthik, and why? Okay, this is a standard test. Samantha gets the higher score because she got 20 out of 30 right and Karthik got 19 out of 30 right. So Samantha got one more right answer. She gets the higher score. That's how most tests that we take are graded. Whoever gets the most right gets the highest score. And in some ways, that is how the integrated reasoning section is graded. Now, that the difficulty of the questions you see in that section will scale your score, right? So if some person gets 6 out of 12 and another person gets 7 out of 12, but the 6 out of 12 had a harder section, those scores might scale to the same score. But basically, your score is how many of those 12 you got right. That's how the integrated reasoning is scored. The GMAT, the quant and the verbal sections of the GMAT, however, are scored very differently. And I suspect if you've been studying for a while, you have heard that this test is adaptive. And if you haven't been studying for a while, welcome to the news. This is one of the stranger features about the GMAT. It is taken on a computer, and it is adapting to you as you are answering questions. Now, what that basically means, and this is a little bit simplified, but what that basically means is that if you get a question right, you tend to get a harder question. If you get a question wrong, you tend to get an easier question. Um, there are exceptions to that. It is more complicated than that. And we'll get into some nuance later. Right now, this first kind of 15, 20 minutes, I'm just going to give honestly what a high level understanding, which is probably all you need, but we will get into some nitty gritty details a little later. But basically, you can think of it as right answers get a harder question, wrong answers get an easier question. That's basically how the algorithm works. And so it's doing that throughout the whole test. Okay. And so what that means is that two test takers can experience a very different test day experience. So here we have student one and student two taking a section of the test. Blue dots are right answers, and you can see the questions get harder after a blue dot. The red dots are wrong answers. You can see the next question is easier after red dots. And so we have student one and student two. And student one, you can see, got to the very hardest questions that the test offered and was getting quite a bit of them right, going about 50-50 for a while. Didn't finish so strong, but was up there at the hardest questions given. Student two never got above that kind of middle level. So my question for you all is not who do you think does get the higher score? I want you to just say who you think deserves the higher score. If you were in charge of the GMAT and you had these two students in front of you, do you think student one wins? Do you think student two wins? Or do you think it should be a tie? Either of those answers is justifiable. I just want to see what you think. Who, if you were in charge, you would pick as the winner of this game. A. Someone thinks student one should win. Harshita says student one should win. Saad says student one. Student two is consistent. Teleficus is noting that student two is more consistent, it seems. Student one has that big, rise and fall. Student two stays right there in the middle. Pooja says student one. Mukesh says student one. So student one is kind of winning here. Most people are choosing student one. There's a vote for student two. And again, there's no wrong answer to this question. Student one got to the hardest questions and was getting them right. Student two didn't even get to those hard questions. So I can understand why you might say that student one should win. No one says they should tie, interestingly. Some people think that, well, but they seem to kind of average it about the same, so maybe they should tie. Also defensible. But here's the twist on this question. What if instead of asking you or telling you that this was the GMAT question difficulty, what if I told you that this was the value of a stock portfolio over the days of a month? Who do you want to be at the end here? Do you want to be student one or student two? If this is not a GMAT score, it is the value of a stock portfolio. Suddenly that question gets pretty straightforward. Okay, if these are the two stock portfolios I get to choose from today, I'm going to choose student two because student two has more in the portfolio. Student one invested hard in some, big winners at one point, but then crashed. Student two didn't get to that peak, but right now is higher. And this is what you need to understand about this test. Where you end is what you get. The place your score ends is the score you get. Okay. The test is not just testing if you can get questions right. In fact, we'll specify later, it is not testing that, really. One thing it is testing you on, though, is your ability to make decisions and to invest time and where to invest time. And student one, yes, got a lot of hard questions right, but I'm going to guess over-invested time on those questions. Took a long time to get some of those right. And then at the end ran out of time and maybe also, ran out of focus and energy. That's another thing that gets depleted. So student one is running out of time. They have to guess at the end. They're guessing, and they start missing questions. They start missing more questions. And the score starts to drop. And since they don't have time to actually do the questions, they're missing questions that are actually easier. And all of them kind of in a row. And so their score plummets. And it's just something to know that I've seen this happen many times with students on practice tests, this score drop at the end, this major score drop, because they've overinvested in earlier questions that just aren't worth the time, even for some right answers. It's an important thing to know that you will get more punished for missing easy questions than you get rewarded for getting hard questions. Missing easier questions tends to anchor a score more and more. A few right answers on hard questions aren't worth it. Okay. So what I tell students is when you're taking this test, you don't want to reach your peak. Student one tried to get as hard as questions as they could get at the expense of time. You don't want to do that. Your goal is not to get a bunch of hard questions right. Your goal is just to kind of get to the level where you're comfortable getting, spending about 2 minutes a question, and sometimes getting right answers and sometimes getting wrong answers. And one of the big things I want you to leave today is feeling more comfortable getting wrong answers. I want that to be something you leave feeling much better about, and we'll see why. So you miss some, you get some, but you're using good time. You're choosing to skip some questions because they look really hard. You're moving on, okay, and you end up where you end up. Because you don't want to reach a peak and then fall. And I've seen it many times, okay? So here's another student one and student two taking a section. These are different student ones and student twos. Student one ends up at a score of 43. Student two ends up at a score of 32. But I want you to note that they both miss about half the questions here. Student one just sees a more difficult basket of questions. A question that is easy for student one is pretty hard for student two. And so student two doesn't get to that same level. Okay. But they both miss about half. And on the test, you should expect to miss about a fourth to 2/5 of the questions you see. On Quant, most people miss 12 questions. That's just how it goes. Okay. Verbal, it's 10 to 15 questions of the 36. And there's no really getting around that. That's just kind of what you should expect to happen. Okay. But here's the thing I also want to emphasize for student one and student two in front of me. If that green level, if that green line is what their ability is, if that's who they are today taking this test, then they both did exactly what they should do. And they did a great job. They got the score that they should get today. And that's a thing to know. When you're in the middle of the test or a practice test, you kind of have to acknowledge that, like, you are who you are today. You're not going to suddenly be, a new person. There's a band of possibility for the scores you get. In between tests and practice tests, you can raise that band, right? If you start, your band may be like a 500 to a 550. Then it might become a 550 to a 610. Then it might be a 580 to a 640. Then it's a 630 to a 680. And then it's a 680 to a 720, right? Whatever. You're moving that band up. But every day there is a band where you have basically a minimum and basically a maximum score possible. And you're going to fall somewhere on that band. And as long as you make good decisions, you will. But if you make bad decisions and you make silly mistakes and you run out of time, then you might actually score less than you should on that band. So for these two students, if the green line is where they should be, I'm proud of both of them because they got what they should get. Now they can keep studying and raise their score more. But they're going to miss about the same number of questions. And the test is going to feel challenging for both of them. It's impossible to study for this, right? Some people are hoping that, like, I'm going to study for this test really well. I go in and I'm going to, I'm not going to miss anything. It's going to feel great. It's going to feel so easy. I'm going to kick its butt and leave. That's not how it works. It's not like other tests in that way. Okay. The first time I took the GMAT, I got a 760. Okay. Top 1% score that allows me to teach for Manhattan Prep. I felt terrible. I felt like I had bombed that test because it just, the way it adapts to you, it's just always trying to challenge you. I thought I got the crud kicked out of me, and I kind of did. That's what the test does. You just kind of learn to laugh about it. Like, man, this is really hard. Okay, next question. Is kind of learn to laugh and keep moving. But it will always feel challenging. Things that really hurt a score, timing issues, and careless mistakes on questions you probably shouldn't miss. Okay. If you score below a score you should, 1 or 2 is fine. You can recover from 1 or 2. Okay. You make 1 or 2 silly mistakes, even early mistakes, you can recover. But if you do it 4, 5, 6, 7 times where you shouldn't miss that question, or and you had to guess because you were short on time or you made a silly mistake, whatever it is, yeah, that's going to ding your score quite a bit. Some silly mistakes are inevitable. I think, everyone's going to make some silly mistakes, but good test takers make fewer, and they get those scores that they should get. Okay, and not finishing is particularly punitive for your score. The way not finishing works on this test is they treat every question as if it's wrong. Okay, so this is question 26 or whatever, where the student stopped answering because they ran out of time. So 26 is wrong. Then the algorithm spits out what question 27 would have been if you'd missed 26, and you missed that one because you don't answer because you're out of time. So then the algorithm spits out what question 28 would have been if you'd missed that one, and you miss it. And then what 29 would have been if you missed it because you did. Then 30 because you missed it. Then 31 because you missed it. And all of a sudden you've missed 6 questions in a row that you really just didn't even get to. And that's punitive. One at the end is okay, but if you skip, if you don't get to 5 or 6 questions, your score takes a ding. Even blind guessing on those questions is better because there's a decent chance you guess right on one of them, and it kind of stops the free fall. So I have a message from Time in a Bottle. That's an apt name. Time in a Bottle says, this happened to me, ran out of time. It's very punitive. I had a student just a few weeks ago. He missed questions 24 to 31 on the quant section. He didn't finish. He was working really hard to get a bunch of questions right. I mean, this is textbook, this student. He didn't get to question 24, and his score ended up at a 26 on quant. Well, I told him, you need to go and correct your timing habits. You need to change, where you're focusing time, and stop trying to get a bunch of questions right, and get through this section and just spend time on questions you feel more comfortable on. And then he took an official practice test and got a 48 in quant just by fixing his timing. Okay, so this kind of thing, I see it all the time. You want to get through the section. Okay, notice also you can't go back on the test. Once you've guessed, you've answered, you move on. It's adapted to you. You don't get to go change it. Go to the next question. But you want to get through the section. Okay, so the old paper tests, when you took a test on pen and paper, the goal was to find the easy questions, get them right pretty quickly, then spend time on the hard questions. Those are going to be the difference makers. That's not how the GMAT works. On an adaptive test, for one, you can't skip. You can't find the easy ones and do them and then go spend time on the hard ones. You have to take it in the order that they give you. But your mindset should be different. When a question pops up that you feel, I can get this, I feel confident, slow down and get it. Don't overinvest in these hard questions and then rush through easy questions. If it looks like something you can get, slow down, get your points. If it looks harder, you can still try it, but be ready to skip it. Might not be worth it. Okay. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier about that improving the band, improving the score band, right? When you start out, you have a score on let's say a section here from 6 to 26. Okay, where 26 is your max and 11 is your minimum, and you're most likely to score somewhere in that middle. But no test is perfect, and no human is a machine. There's a band of possibility. You're not going to get the same score every time. Even if you took it 2 days in a row, right? Sometimes it happens, but that's not expected. There's a band of possibility. And over time, your job is to move that band up. Okay. That's what improvement looks like. But notice that the improvement of the person who's on this band can look very different. Their first practice test might have actually been on the high end of that band. And then they might actually end up on the last practice test on the low end of the band. And it thinks like, oh my gosh, I've only improved 4 points. Not really. You've improved a whole band of possibility that's much different than 4 points. You just happen to start on your high end and ended on your low end. The same student might have started at the low end and ended on the high end and been like, wow, I improved 50 points, whatever. Don't use a few test scores as a trend. You need a trend over time to figure out how much you're improving. Okay. Simran asks, can we crack the GMAT in 4 weeks? Depends on where you're starting. That's usually less time than I would recommend. Usually I recommend studying for 3 to 6 months, and that's what most people do. But I have seen people do it fast. It does happen. So you're improving this band over time. That's how you improve a score. Okay. What questions can I answer so far? How is it possible to have very similar number of errors but completely different scores? Good question. We're about to lay that out, I think. I think we'll do something that will help you understand how this works. Often, I think this metaphor will also help for your question. So here's the metaphor I use for the scoring algorithm. Okay. Let's pretend for some reason, oh, by the way, this was created, as far as I know, I first heard it from a teacher named Kaylee Erickson, who used to work for Manhattan Prep. And I thought it was just a really great metaphor. So I give her full credit for it. Let's pretend for some reason you wanted to figure out how far I could throw a ball accurately over time consistently. So what you do, for some reason, since you can't watch me throw the ball, that sure would be easy if you could just watch me throw and take some measurements, but you can't do that. We have to make it a game. Instead, what you can do is you can set up a target a certain distance from me. Okay, and you know how far that distance is. And then I throw the ball at the target. And then a computer tells you if I hit the target or not. Okay. And then you can move a little bit further back. I can throw again. And the computer tells you if I hit it or not. Then you can move a little forward, then a little back, a little forward, back, 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 forward, forward. You're trying to figure out where I go 60% accurate hitting the target over time. At what distance do I go 60% accurate? Bhavya, this metaphor will, I think, also help answer your question about, do the first 10 questions have substantial impact? Yes and no. It's not quite that simple. So you imagine this target game. You get to set a distance. I throw a ball. A computer tells you if I hit the target or not. And then you can set a new distance. Your goal is to figure out, where does Reed throw 60% accurate? Okay. You also know that the computer, sometimes, if I miss the target, there's a 20% chance that the computer tells you I hit the target. Okay, that's to represent, on a multiple choice test, the 1 in 5 guessing odds. So this is how you get to find out if at what distance I throw this ball 60% accurate. Okay. And imagine what it looks like for me as the thrower. If you put the target right in front of me, 1 meter in front of me, I'll hit it 100% of the time. No problem. You move it to 5 meters, I'll still probably hit it 99% of the time. Maybe a little less. 5 meters, yeah, I'll probably miss sometimes. 10 meters from me. Okay, now I'm a little less accurate. Depends how big the target is, but it's going to be 95% of the time. 15 meters, 90% of the time. 20 meters, 80% of the time. 25 meters, 70% of the time. And the further that target gets from me, the lower my chance of hitting it. That's who I am today, throwing at this target. If I practice, maybe I can get more accurate, but today I have my accuracy at every distance. And the algorithm's job is to figure out what that accuracy is. Where does it go 60% accurate? Okay. So take a look at this table on the right. I'll just let you know how I did this. I did all this morning. I ran this experiment a few times. I chose for this person, for me right now, I said, okay, I am 60% accurate at a distance of 39, call it 39 meters. That's where I go 60% accurate. 38 meters, I'm a little bit more accurate, 63%. 37, I'm 67% accurate. 36, I'm 70% accurate. At 27 meters, I'm basically automatic. I'm 99% accurate. And notice at 48, I'm 20% accurate. And at that point, I'm going to be 20% accurate for 49, 50, and 51 because I'm missing. I can't throw that far. But the computer tells you 20% of the time that I hit it because of the false positive rate. But after 39 meters, I go a little bit less accurate. I'm 50-50 at 42 meters, and it's a little less likely all the way down to 20%. So these are just, I kind of arbitrarily chose this distribution. By the way, this is just a metaphor for how the algorithm works. I am not doing complicated statistical analysis on this like the GMAT is doing, but it will get you an idea of how this works. Okay, so these were my odds at these distances. And the computer's job, quote unquote, is to figure out where I go 60% accurate. Okay. And so I used a random number generator. So I started at 30. And at 30, I had a 90% chance of hitting that target. And I used a random number generator to decide with 90% accuracy or with a 90% chance if I hit the target or not. 90% chance, I hit it. So then I went to 35. At 35, I have a 73% chance. Random number generator, it said I hit it. Okay, so I jumped to 45. At 45, I have a 35% chance. 1 in 3, basically. But the random number generator said I hit it. So I went to 50. 50, I'm blind guessing. It's 20% odds. The random number generator said I missed. So I went back to 45, said I hit. I went to 48, said I missed. 45 or 46, missed. 45, I hit again. So that's 3 hits at 45 in a row when I only had a 35% chance of hitting it. But the random number generator spit out that I hit it, so I said I hit it. Jump to 46, miss. Down to 43, miss. Up to 45 again, miss. Notice that time I didn't adapt. Even though I missed it, I went harder because the algorithm doesn't always adapt the way it should, quote unquote. Missed to 45. So that's a few misses in a row. So I went to 40. I missed a 40. That's a lot of misses in a row. Let's go to 30. Let's make sure I actually got the 30. I got it. 38, got it. Okay, 41. So I was just running this experiment using a random number generator. 43 miss, 41 hit, 43 hit, 46 hit, 46 miss, 44 hit, 45 hit, 46 miss, 44 miss, 42 hit, 43 hit, 44 miss, 43 miss, 41, I can't quite see it, 41 miss, 40 hit. That's what the random number generator said. Okay. So after those 31 trials, I missed the target 14 times, and I ended up at about a 40. Notice that on the table, the place where I gave myself 60% accuracy was about a 39. Okay. This is what the GMAT algorithm is doing. You have a certain chance at every difficulty of getting questions right or wrong. Easy questions, you go 99%. A little bit harder, you go 90%. A little bit harder, you go 80%. The test is trying to figure out at what difficulty do you go 60% accurate. How do they determine difficulty? They've given the question to a lot of people, and they know how many people get it right. They know the odds of the average person getting it right. So an average difficulty question, 75% of people get right. That means that an average test taker will get 3 out of 4 of those questions right. A great test taker gets those 99% of the time. Okay, their 60% mark is much harder. Okay, but this is what the algorithm is doing. So I just ran this experiment with this person. Notice the person on the right stays the same. This is the same person. Okay. 60% chance is at 39. Okay. Different experiment. Just take a minute and look at it. Ended up at about the same place, but kind of took a different trajectory. The first time I got the 30, I got the 35, I got a 45. I kind of, since I got some lucky guesses at 45, I got 3 of those right in a row. I kind of was above 45 for a while, but statistics caught up to me and I dropped back down. This student actually missed the 35 when they had a 73% chance of getting that question right. They missed it, so went down to 30 again. Then they missed 35 again. This is kind of the opposite. My first trial, I was getting some harder questions right that I had a good chance of missing. In this trial at the beginning, I was missing some questions I had a good chance of getting. But then statistics caught up and I ended up at about the same place. Now, reminder, this is just a metaphor. I'm not doing all the fancy statistics. This is just kind of a gut feeling. I'm getting a little bit harder when I get a question right, a little bit easier when I get a question wrong, and just kind of, running it every time. At the beginning, the jumps are a little bit bigger. Then as you get on, the jumps get a little bit smaller. That does happen in the test. Okay. But notice, same test taker. First time was 14 mistakes. This time was 12 misses. Basically the same score. Okay. Here's the same test taker again. Same, notice on the right, same test, same data. I'm just running a random number generator. This student, if I remember this trial right, this student had a bunch of kind of just got a little lucky. I mean, lucky is maybe not the right word. Statistics are noisy. This is just pure random number generation. This is as objective as data can get. And it just happened to be that the data on this test, this test taker got a 40 right at the end, and then another 40, and then a 43, and then a 45, and missed a 46, but then got a 44, and then got a 45. When the odds of getting those right, I mean, it's not nothing. It's still 45, 35, 40%. And just happened to get a bunch of them right in a row at the end, and it inflated the score to a 45. Same test taker, ball thrower. So here we have some 40s, 12 misses, 40, 12 misses. Same person, 45, 12 misses. Okay. I've missed 11 questions on official practice tests. I've missed 11 questions and gotten a quant score 50. I have missed 3 questions and gotten a quant score 50. I've missed 4 questions and gotten a quant score 51. I've missed 2 questions. I think I got a 50. Like 11 and 3 misses, same score. The number missed is just not really the game. Okay. The test is trying to figure out where you go 60% accurate, and it's just adapting as you throw the ball, do the questions. Okay. And, fine tuning where you end up. That's the game. And notice the same data point on the right, the same person with the same distribution of odds can end up at different places. Sometimes 45, sometimes you get a little lucky, you score on the high end, right? But it's a probability distribution. This person scored a 45 today. That's not very likely. They got a little bit lucky. But luck is not the right word, right? Because they worked hard to get to the distribution they had. And that means that, there's a chance of getting a 45. It's not maybe a great chance, but they've put themselves in a position where they have a chance of getting a 45. Someone else doesn't really have that chance. It's very unlikely that they can get a 45. For this person, it's pretty unlikely. But for some students, it's so unlikely that it's just not going to happen. So I call it luck, but it's not really luck. You just have your band of distributions. You're going to fall on the high end or the low end of that band. You don't really control that. That's kind of the crummy thing. You just have to accept it. Like, you are that person on the right here. You have your distributions. Show up to the test, do it. You're basically just putting a coin in. You're the coin. You're putting yourself into the machine at that point, and it's going to spit out a score. And it's going to be a score somewhere on your distribution. And you hope it's on the high end, and you hope to minimize careless mistakes so it's on the high end. But you are who you are. Just run the algorithm. Let it do what it does. Over time, you can move up that algorithm, or you can move up your distribution. But today, just plug it in, see what happens. This is a same student, but this is to demonstrate something else, right? That red line, they ran out of time. Okay. The bold is where I decided this student spent too much time, right? This same student, their 60% mark is 39. Well, this 45, that's pretty hard for them. 45, they have a 1 in 3 chance, but that's a pretty good chance of missing. And if you spend a lot of time to miss, that's not worth it. 40, they have a good chance of 40, but they spent a lot of time and missed anyway. 45 miss, 43 miss. I didn't choose, by the way, to spend extra time on the ones they missed. That's just what happened. I just said, okay, this question, it's a 45. Let's imagine the student went long on it. Did they get it right? No. Okay, this is a 40. Let's imagine the student went long on it. Did they get it right? No. 45, no. 43, no. 40, they go long on it. Did they get it right? Yes. So sometimes they went long and got it right, but point is they ran out of time. Okay. They ran out of time, and in the last 6 questions, they didn't have time to actually guess. So it's just 6 wrong answers in a row. And so that score dropped 45, 43, 40, 38, 36, 33. This student ends up at a 33. This is the fall from grace that we saw from that student earlier. Got to really hard questions, spent a lot of time on them, and then just plummeted at the end. Okay. You run out of time, you can't recover. You just start missing, and that tanks a score. Okay. I did it again where instead of running out of time, I gave a student that they were like pretending they were clicking through. So they have 20% chance every question. Well, the first time I did it, it just happened that the random number generator said that this student missed every question. So it's just the same as running out of time. So they ended up at the same place. This student got 1 right. And notice if you guess, this is why it's good to guess. It's better to guess than to run out of time because you have a decent chance of getting 1 right. And it, kept the score a little bit afloat. Okay. But then this student had bad luck, no right answers. And then again, I did the random number generation, all wrong answers. And then again, same outcome. And then this time, really good luck. Got the first 3 right and ended up at a 45. And then 1 right answer. The first one was a right answer and ended up at a 37. And then another one where the first one was right. And then 2 right ended up at a 39. So like you can just doing this game. And again, this is not a perfect representation of the algorithm. It's much more simple than that because I was just going by my, own whims. But you get a sense of what's going on, what that algorithm is trying to do. And running out of time and not answering it puts a lot of chance on the table. You don't want to be in that place. Okay. Now, this is a new student. So now we're jumping to a new student. Take a look at the table on the right. This had been so far a student who had a 60% chance at 39. This student's 60% mark is at 28. Okay, so this is a quote unquote weaker student. They have a lower chance of getting easier questions right than that one before. And notice what happened. Look at the distribution here. Got the 30, hit it, 35, missed, 30, missed, 25, hit, yada, 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 yada. For the sake of time, you don't need to look through all of it. Just know I was the same game. I was just running random number generator. Ended up at a score of about a 28, which is where they go 60% accurate. And they missed 13 times. Okay. Same student, underperformed this time. We saw a student earlier get a little bit lucky, end up on the high end of their spectrum. This student missed easier questions and ended up 4 points lower than they should. That happens. You can't really control that. You control who you are. But once you're in the test, you kind of just, hopefully you make good decisions and don't run out of time and you're going to end up somewhere. So this student had a bad day, just didn't didn't get the score they should get or could get. I just ended up on the low end of the spectrum just by, again, sheer dumb luck. But notice 12 misses ended up at a 24. The first student, 12 misses, got a 40 because of the way this algorithm works. And I think the ball throwing analogy makes it a little clearer. Now, let's imagine a high score. For this person, the 50%, the 60% mark is 50. And let's imagine that to match the GMAT, the computer algorithm doesn't go further than 51 meters. It doesn't work at that point. That's what the GMAT's done. They just decided 51 is the max. And so for this person whose 60% mark is a 50, right, they get a bunch of questions right at the beginning, then they get to the high 40s. It kind of becomes a game of 47 to 51, 48, 50, 51, 50. Ended kind of poorly here and scored 4 points, 3 points lower than they should. Still a great score, right? But their actual 60% mark is 50. They ended up at a 47. I ran it with the same student. Yeah, same student. Got a 51. Missed 10 times. 47, 12 misses. 51, 12, 10 misses. Okay. So it's really not the number missed that matters. That's just not the game. Okay. This student is really strong. In fact, this student is too strong for the test. This student's 60% mark is actually at a distance that the test doesn't even really get to. At the furthest the test gives us, this student goes 83% accurate. And so, yes, this student only misses 5 questions. Not because the test cares how many questions you missed, but because the test doesn't have harder questions to give. And so, congratulations, this person beats the test. But it doesn't actually change their strategy. They're still just deciding over time which questions to do and which questions to skip. They're not trying to get hard questions right. They're just who they are. This person missed 10, got a 51. This person missed 5, got a 51. Again, I've missed 11 and gotten a 50. I've missed 4 and gotten a 51. I've missed 3 and gotten a 50. Okay. It's just there's noise in the data. So some close enough approximations for you. Number correct is not the game. Pretty much everyone misses the same number. Once you are at that high scoring level, like this student, yes, you do miss fewer questions. But not because you're trying to get more questions right, because you're at a place where your probability distributions are higher. You're just more likely to get questions at the difficulty the GMAT gives questions. You've beaten the test. But you can't go into the test trying to be this person if you aren't this person. You are who you are. Plug in that, get the score. Study in between and improve it. Okay. No question is weighted more, and early questions do not really matter more. As you can tell, that's not the game. Again, think about the ball throwing analogy. If you make some silly mistakes, you can recover. If you get at a high end, you're probably going to fall because statistics are going to do what they do. You're just dealing one question at a time. The most important question is the one in front of you. That's the game. The most important question is the one in front of you. Do it, guess, move on. Now that's the most important question. To some degree, you can think about the test. The ceiling of your score is determined by the easier questions you miss, and the floor is determined by the harder questions you earn. Again, this is a close enough approximation. Ceiling is determined by the easier questions you miss. If you miss too many easy questions, it's just the score is not going to let you get above it, whatever it is. It's depending on the person. Score killers, things that really hurt you, misses on questions that you should get, lots of misses in a row, and leaving questions blank at the end. Again, it's close enough to think about get a right answer, get a harder question, get a wrong answer, get an easier question. It's not quite that simple, but it's close enough. And there is some luck involved on where you end up on your distribution. You can't control it. You just kind of, do what you do. Some nuance here. At higher scores, the test can't adapt to harder questions. So at that point, the number correct comes into play, but that's only when you're getting all the questions right anyway. Early questions set a trajectory. That's why they're important. But you can recover from some silly mistakes. You can prove to the test, oh, I shouldn't have missed that question on number 4. That was silly. I get those right almost all the time. But if you keep making silly mistakes, well, then they're not silly mistakes anymore. They're bad habits. They're content weaknesses. And you're not going to recover from your early misses. At the end of the test, the algorithm actually discounts the outliers. The 1 or 2 easiest questions and the 1 or 2 hardest questions that you saw, regardless of whether you got them right or wrong, get weighted less. So they do kind of discount the extremes. And you don't always get a harder question when you get an answer right, or an easier question when you get a question wrong. Sometimes there's some fluctuation there. Okay. And once the test is finished, the question order does not matter. So these are the same questions, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and the same right and wrong answers to those questions in totally different orders. The score would be identical for these questions. Okay. Each next question is determined by the questions you've already seen and how you performed on them. Just like on the ball throwing analogy, each distance, I wasn't running statistical computations, but when I was choosing what distance to do next, it was always thinking about what distances I'd done before and how I did on them. Right? I got a 30, great, try a 35. I got a 35, great, try a 40. I missed a 40. Okay, let's go back to 35. I got a 35, great, let's go to 40. Oh, I got a 40. Let's go to 42. Let's go to 45. Let's go to 48. Okay, I missed a 51. Let's go back to 48. I missed a 48. Let's go back to 45, right? I'm adjusting based on how I performed on the questions I've seen before. But you can recover from silly mistakes and prove that it was a silly mistake. Okay. I don't think we're going to discuss item characteristic curves, mostly because we don't have time, and mostly because that gets to a level of detail that we probably don't need to worry about today. I think I've hit the big stuff in the way that I think it needs to be discussed. So I hope, again, that this gives you a better sense of what's actually happening with the GMAT algorithm. Remember that its goal is to figure out where you go 60% accurate. In order to do that, it has to make you miss. If it knew where that was, if it just knew, it would give you questions at that difficulty level, and you'd get 60% of them right, and you'd miss 40% of them. And that would be, so even if it was perfect, if it just figured you out immediately, you still miss 40% of the questions. So just expect to miss 40% of the questions, or, again, 25 to 40%. It's just going to happen unless you've absolutely mastered this game, right? And great, but that doesn't even really change how you perform on the test, like how you're thinking and strategizing on the test. It just changes what the output is, changes what score you get. But be comfortable missing, be comfortable bailing. The algorithm has to do its job. Let it. Don't try to get a bunch of questions right. You're going to miss a bunch of questions, and you're going to feel like it's really hard. You just kind of laugh and move on. Okay, so Felix asks, what should I do? You don't want to be worrying about the algorithm in the exam room. Exactly. You don't want to be worrying about the algorithm in the exam room. You don't want to be worrying about your score in the exam room. That's the point. You just deal with the question in front of you and the time you have left. And if you feel like, hey, I'm on pace and I feel pretty good about this question, this is something I feel like I can do, slow down, double check your work, get it right. If you're looking at questions like, man, this question looks really difficult, and I'm on pace, but I don't want to fall behind on a question I don't feel very good about, then don't guess and move on. Spend your time on the question that pops up that you're like, yep, I feel like I can get this. Question looks hard and you're on time, poke at it. Okay, I'm kind of figuring some stuff out. Okay, keep working. But if it's, okay, this has gone 3 minutes and I'm not there yet, bail. You tried, move on. That's what you do in the test room. Okay. So I hope this was illuminating. I hope you have a better kind of gut sense. Again, I think that ball throwing game really makes intuitive sense to students. So I hope that helps. I hope you keep it in mind as you're studying and taking practice test and the real test. Um, I have about 5 minutes now, though. I'd love to answer any questions you all have, but thank you so much for being here. Thank you, GMAT Club, for hosting. I look forward to the next one. Good time in a bottle. I'm glad. It's very different. It's a very different kind of scoring method. But again, I love it. I think it's great because you are free from the burden of perfectionism. You're free from the burden of trying to get every question right. It's really nice. I love knowing that I can miss 11 quant questions and get the second highest possible score. 11 out of 31, that's more than 1 in 3. And I got a 50. That was the first time I'd ever gotten a 50. It was the highest score I'd ever gotten at that point, and I missed 11 questions. And I was just like, that's great. What a great way to take a test. No, sir, because you don't want to rush and miss questions earlier. No, the last. I mean, it's nice to get the last question right, but not at the expense of 2 silly mistakes earlier because you were rushing. Do you think the first 2 quarters are important in quant? Yeah, of course. Of course, they're important. Again, think about the ball throwing analogy. Are the first 2 quarters important in the ball throwing analogy? Yeah, because I'm throwing the right. It determines how accurate I am. It gives the test data about how accurate I am. More important, no. I don't think that's the right way to think about it. If you're not scoring well on a mock test, does it mean that you won't score well on the actual GMAT? It depends on how good the mock test is. If it's a good, accurate mock test, I mean, I usually tell my students that it's unwise to go into an official GMAT test and uh, try to score 30 points higher, more than 30 points higher than your highest score on a practice test. So that's what I consider like, a great outcome is 30 points more than your highest practice score test. Have I seen people do more than that? Yeah, I've seen people do more than that. But it's not common. Okay, it's just not common to see people jump significantly on that official test after practice tests, and you shouldn't expect that, and you shouldn't try to do it. Again, you just deal with the question in front of you. Same applies to verbal. Yes, everything I've talked about today is true for both sections. The official GMAT practice tests, I believe, do use the official algorithm. I might be wrong, but I think the official tests do. Other companies' practice tests, including Manhattan Preps, don't because the GMAC has that algorithm under lock and key. We do our best approximations of it and are quite good, but it's not the official algorithm. But our practice tests are adaptive in the way the GMAT is. So it does feel very similar. Off and on, you're planning to bail on hard CR even in the first quarter. Will that be okay? It depends what score you're going for. And it depends on who you are as a test taker. If you miss those and they take a lot of time, then yeah, that's fine. If you're going for a Quant 45 or Quant 40 plus, eventually you want to get to a point where you get a lot of the hard critical reasoning. But if you're taking it tomorrow, you got to deal with who you are. And if that's a good use of time, that's what you got to do. All right, everybody, I have to wrap up this session because I actually have to go teach a class. But thank you again so much for coming. Thank you, GMAT Club, for hosting. Really, really fun. Please check out Manhattan Prep. Okay, we have free resources off the wazoo for those looking to study on a budget. Free GMAT Prep hours on YouTube. You can attend our Foundations of Math class for free. You can take the first course of our 9-week course for free, and we talk about some big stuff in that. Okay, you can try out our Interact for free. We talk about some big stuff in the early sections. So might as well take advantage of those. All right. Otherwise, I will see you all on GMAT Club. Post on the message board. I'll talk to you there. And thanks so much for coming. See y'all soon. Best of luck studying.